All right, Stephen K. Peeples here, and I'm with Steve Meyer, a former colleague at Capitol Records, and he was in the promotion department and also went on to fame and fortune at MCA Records in promotion as well. But we've been doing a series of interviews about his exploits, and one of the people that came up that we wanted to talk about was Al Coury, who was a promotion executive at Capitol a little bit before my time, but during Steve's time. And Steve knew him well, worked with him closely. And so, Steve, tell us about your experience with Al Coury, how you met him, what he meant to Capitol Records as an executive.
Sure. I want to preface it by saying that, in my opinion, Al was one of the great record people, and they don't exist anymore. Clive Davis is probably the last of the great record people, in my opinion. But in the era of the Mo Austins and the Ahmet Ertegans, and the Clive Davises and the David Geffens, Al was definitely in that group. He was well noted across the industry after he accomplished what he did at Capitol, and then later, after he left Capitol, RSO Records, where he accomplished one of the greatest feats in the world by having the number 1 and 2 album, double pocket albums, Grease and Saturday Night Fever. I first met Al in 1970-71 when I was the East Coast album marketing promotion guy for Capitol Records, working album radio stations, specifically in the tri-state area. But if there was expansion down the East Coast, I was to work those too. But Al at that time was functioning in artist development and A&R. And he would call me constantly to tell me about groups that he was booking into the city, in the village specifically, small venues, new acts like Joy of Cooking, Yellow Hand, etc. And he would always want me to bring radio people and media people if I can get them. And it was a very difficult thing to do, because coming into New York at that time, on any given week, every label had acts being exposed, and there were acts selling out the Garden, etc. So it was a very competitive thing. I was able to do that very, very efficiently. I always managed to get people there, and I always get people to talk about it. And some of those records ended up on the radio in New York and elsewhere. So we built up quite a rapport on the phone on a week-to-week basis. I met him physically when Capitol Records unveiled its Capitol East building, 1370 Avenue of the Americas, headed by Dick Asher at that time, an ex-Columbia guy. And they unveiled the building, and all the executives from LA flew in, and Al was one of them. And that's when we physically got together. And he took me back to my office, and he just started talking about music. And I got to tell you that before Al, for me, it was dynamic, because unbelievable as it may sound, in the period of 12 to 18 months prior to Al becoming the VP of promotion, which he was not yet, I worked for 8 different heads of promotion.
Good Lord.
8. Yeah. And it went from across the board. It started with Roger Karshner, the man that hired me. And then it went through a myriad of people. John Stanton, who was one of the branch managers. Larry Hathaway was in there for a minute. Sidney Miller was in there. A guy named Evan Reynolds. It was
What was the problem? What was the problem? Why was it so dysfunctional? Revolving door. Why did people come in and go like that fast?
Well, I think the reason was due to a number of things. Number one, the label was ice cold at that point. Other than the Beatles had broken up, and other than Glenn Campbell, who was receiving a lot of top 40 play, Grand Funk Railroad was the other big act, but they were on album radio at that time. They had no hit singles. They weren't really breaking acts. That's why they signed distribution deals very quickly with Shelter and Island. So it was really what Al called, he told me the story. He said he looked upon that job as the death trap. If you took that job, you weren't going to be in it very long. They wanted results, and they wanted results fast. They were demanding. At that time, I should also say that prior to Al coming into promotion, that the sales directors in every branch directed the promotion people. There was no, so the head of promotion that's right, the head of promotion in LA, gave direction. But for example, if the guy in Dallas wanted the promotion man in Dallas to go work country radio harder to sell more country records, he did that. There was no unification really among the whole team. So it finally, what happened was EMI, of course, sent over Bhaskar Menon to straighten out the company. They handed him a mandate.
This was in 75, 76.
No, Bhaskar came in and Al took over in 71 or 70.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I don't know.
I
don't know. I don't know if Bhaskar was here full time, but he's the one that told Al, I need you to take the job. And Al, I didn't know this at the time. Al didn't want the job because he was very happy in artist relations and A&R. And he had done such a great job, and he was a high energy guy. And Bhaskar looked at him and said, I need somebody to do promotion. So Al's story is one of the greatest stories. He said, so Steve, I went home, I took out a yellow legal pad, and I I listed down all the things I knew that Bhaskar would never give me. I need a company car. I want a car phone. Now, this is 1971 or 72. And back then, the only people that had car phones were rich people, and that's it. I mean, they were radio phones. But anyway, he wrote down a list. Only I can hire and fire promotion people. I can bonus them. All the direction will come from the tower, not from the brand. But he said, basically, I put a list together. It had over 50 items on it. And I knew that Bhaskar would never give them to me. Son of a bitch, he gave me them all. Bhaskar said, you got it, everything. That's how desperate we are. So he said he got the job. And from that point on, which was late 71, early 72, I can't remember at the time, he called up the promotion people and he said, we're having a meeting in Atlanta. And I want to meet everybody and bring everybody together. So we went to the Hyatt Regency in Atlanta, and we had a dinner with him the first night. And he said, tomorrow morning you're going to meet Brown Meggs, who at that time was the GM, Executive VP of Capital. And he said, after he leaves and does his speech, I'm going to talk. And Mr. Meggs came in and told us what dire financial straits Capital was in. It was a very, very, very serious, depressing speech. And after he left, you could the energy in the room was deflated. And Al got up and he goes, well, I didn't bring you here for that. I brought you here to talk to you about what I'm going to do. And he said, I'm going to tell you right now, I'm a winner. I'm going to tell you that I've never lost at anything I've ever done. And I'm not going to lose this. We're going to go out and we're going to make hits. It's not going to be easy because you guys haven't had the respect at radio, because we haven't had them in a while, but I'm going to make them. And I'm going to tell you right now, it's going to get very tough. But I promise you that if you take this ride with me, if you go with me, you're going to be on a winning team. And I'm going to tell you right now that it's going to get so tough that some of you aren't going to be used to it. Effective immediately, I'm your boss. The sales directors are no longer your boss. Effective immediately, I'm responsible for your salaries, for your bonus and everything. And he went on. And then he said, I can't tell you what's coming. I'm going to tell you that in a conference call in a week or two. But I'm telling you right now that what is coming is going to be very, very competitive, big product. And when you hear it, you'll know that I'm telling you the truth. And if those people in this room don't think they're going to be able to take the pressure, then after this meeting, or consequently weeks later, if you feel you have to quit, because it's going to get rough. And we all went back to our branches. And I got to tell you, for me, it was a very, very encouraging meeting, because that's what I wanted to hear. We hadn't had somebody come in and grab the bull by the horns and lead us.
You were desperate for leadership and direction.
Terrible. So at that same time, previous to him taking the full-time job. The branch manager in Miami at the time, a guy named Jerry Brackenridge, called me back in New York and said, would you like to come back to Florida? We have no promotion, man. I need one badly. I can't get my sales figures on these releases up. If I can get you back, would you come back? So I went back to Florida. And right almost immediately after that, that's when Al came in and we had the meeting in Atlanta. And then subsequently, we had started having something we never had before. We had weekly conference calls, and you got your direction. And then we had stat sheets that we started to receive every week with all the radio stations that were Billboard, Cashbox, Record World, et cetera. And we had communication. And what Al encouraged us to do was to talk to each other as well. So if you were breaking something in your market, call up the guy in the market next to you and get excited, and et cetera, et cetera. He wanted us to utilize every means and way available to get us off and go. And in very short order, we had a couple of hit singles, and they weren't enough to really give us the monstrous thing that started to happen. And 73 was the year it blew wide open. But I think we had a couple of hit singles in 72. One of them was, I think, Hurricane Smith. Oh, babe, what would you say? But as soon as we started getting our direction and we started backing up radio when they started playing stuff, things started to turn a little. And then in 73, the floodgates opened. And I think it was I think the first thing in 73 that happened was Dark Side of the Moon. And I remember the conference call that we had about that. And it was an incredible, Al was just going on and on about this was going to be a masterpiece. And of course, those of us that had been with Capitol for a while had listened to Pink Floyd for years. Nothing that they had ever recorded prior to Dark Side of the Moon was what you would call mass appeal music, or even had the ability to have a mass appeal hit on it. And we didn't know if Dark Side of the Moon did either at that point, but Al was adamant that we were going to make money a hit. And we did. And I can only tell you that it exploded. When that album hit the airwaves, album specifically first, almost every branch had the same reaction. It was a long, hard haul initially for the single, because Top 40 Radio said, look, the name Pink Floyd's alien to my audience. They don't know it. It sounds goofy. But once they played the record, you know, and we had to do an edit on, of course, the single, take out the word shit. Yeah, we had to take out that word. But other stations played it. So right after that, not much long after that, in the same year, we had The Joker with Steve Miller, which Al, again, told us what he was going to do. And he said, I'm going to tell you right now, you got to, the one thing about Al that you have to know is that when he told you something, he never, ever lied to his troops or misled them. And he backed you up 1,000%. To the point where, like, if you were at risk of doing something in your market that may or may not be right or wrong, he backed you up to the nth degree. For me, it was an incredible experience because what he did for me was, I got thrown out of a radio station in Miami, Y100, because I took them a Paul McCartney single last because they weren't playing 3 of my other records that were in the top 20. And when I walked into the radio station to give them the record, the music director came out and said, you're banned from the station. What's your boss's name? What's his phone number? And I gave it to him. It's Al Coury. I immediately went back to the branch and called Al and told him. And his first response to me was, let me get this right. He's not playing 3 records of ours? I said, yeah. The 3 in the top 15. I can't remember what they were at this time, but he's not playing. Why? And I said, he's in a group of call-out programmers. They do the research. They have their favorites, and Capitol's not one of his favorites. He said, "That's it. They banned you." He said, "Okay, I'll call you if the guy calls me." And later that afternoon, he called me, and he said, "I got off the phone with the program director." Yeah, he says he started ranting about you. Told me you were unprofessional and da da da, and how could anybody at a label have this guy in that would do this? And Al said to the program director, "Let me get this right. You don't like Steve Meyer because he brought you a record last, but I have 3 records in the national top 15. You're not playing any of them. But Steve's got him on every single radio station in the state, except yours.
Except yours.
Except yours. And can you tell me the reason?" And when it got to that, he said, "And let me tell you one more thing. I don't pay Steve Meyer to go to radio stations that don't play Capitol records. I pay him to get records played. That's it. So what else are you going to talk about?" The end of the conversation.
What else you got?
Yeah, what else you got? At the end of the conversation, the program director actually said, "I apologize. I'm adding all the 4 records next week." And he did. And that's the kind of guy he was. He did that with any one of his staff that he liked. He trusted you to do the same thing for him when he came out and said, "I need this." He would call you sometimes on a Saturday or Sunday night and said, "I'm coming with a record, this record. If I send you a test pressing, will you listen to it and tell me what you think you can do?" He did that with Band on the Run. And I said, "Sure." Paul McCartney? Yeah. And then he would call and say, "Well, after you listen to it, what do you think?" And I said, "Well, for the next single, we already had Hell on Wheels," which, by the way, Paul did not want to put on the American album. Al Coury is the one that talked Paul McCartney into putting Hell on Wheels on that album. Paul didn't want. I don't even know if it was on the English album when it first came out, but it was on the American LP. And Al said to him, "You got to put it on there. We made it a hit here, and it's already on the album." So we put it out. But he wanted to know what the next single was. So I listened to the album all weekend, and when he called me Sunday night, he said, "What do you think?" And I said, "Well, there's a couple of here, but if you're asking me what I would put out for the next single, I would put out Jet." And he said, "Why?" And I said, "It's dynamic and it's instant and it's this and it's that." And he said, "I feel the same way. You're the third person that echoes that. That's what we're going with." And he said, "How many stations can you get me the day that we release that record? Because I want to go to Paul McCartney and say, this is what I want to do." So I said, "All of them, except maybe one. I'll have them all except me, And I said, "All of them except maybe one. And the 1 week I'll get them all." And they said, "Can you commit to that?" I said, "Absolutely." He said, "Okay." And that was the next single. I was one of the guys that helped him make that choice. Subsequent to that, he gave us a great conference call and said, "I got good news and bad news. The good news is you have a monster hit coming with Linda Ronstadt. The bad news is David Geffen signed it." And of course, we had gone through the same thing with Pink Floyd. Clive Davis had sniped Pink Floyd prior to Dark Side of the Moon. So Al sent us all copies of the Heart Like a Wheel album, and we all heard You're No Good for the first time. And of course, it went to #1. The album was huge. It became Linda's breakthrough album. It established her. Well, Al wasn't happy with that. He was a little upset that David Geffen had done that. So
timing is everything, though.
So if you Google Al Coury and look at a lot of images, you will find a photo of Al with Linda and shirts that he gave out to the entire staff that said "Linda found asylum on Capitol."
Right. I remember that shirt. Yes.
And we gave him out the radio, and they were great. So he went on this the batting average, of course, at the same time. I don't know if it was in 73. I think it was a little later. Um, I think it was later than that. We came out with, of course, the album that busted Grand Funk wide open, which was We're an American Band. And back then, if you shipped an album gold, that was like a big deal because that was 500,000 units in the pipeline. Not many acts could do that, and not many did. Even if you could, not every act did it. So Al took out trade ads. He was so convinced that We're an American Band was going to be a monster that he took out trade ads with the album. He put it on gold vinyl. And he said, Grand Funk Railroad, We're an American Band, shipping gold. And of course, it caused everybody in radio, to talk about it and look for it. And it became their breakthrough single and multi-platinum status. During that time, everything that he directed, everything that he promoted, and everything that he did unified and made us pound for pound the best promotion team in the industry. We didn't have as many people as Columbia and Warner's, but we sure nailed a lot of hits. And from late 71 until the day he left in 76 and beyond, we were hot and hot and hot. And by the way, I've completely skipped over all the solo Beatle projects that Al worked with, and gave direction to. Band on the Run. He's the one that demanded the Band on the Run single. And Paul said, I think I've told you this story because John Palladino is the man that did the edit on the radio single.
Mr. Snips, yes.
Mr. Snips. And Paul said, I'll give you the single if you promise not to edit it. And Al said, of course. Then he called John and he said, I need an edit. And of course, Paul never knew because the commercial single wasn't an edit. So, but he guided Paul through the Band on the Run project. John through Walls and Bridges, Ringo on the Ringo album, which was multi-platinum, 3 hit singles. So he really became a dynamic force within the building. Now, when he first got into the job, he was the VP of promotion. He was still overseeing artist development, and he still had a foot in A&R. He subsequently gave up A&R, and when promotion got to be full-fledged, and he took on more responsibility in that department, even though he was doing more than promotion. He didn't do artist development anymore either. He was strictly full-fledged promotion. And for the entire promotion staff, we had people actually calling from other labels that wanted to come to Capitol. Promotion people that were working at labels said, I got to go to work for this guy. He backs people up. And he really stood up to a lot of industry, cloak and dagger stuff. There was a radio tip sheet that put out an editorial that attacked Capitol at the time for promoting a single by a young kid named Rick Springfield. And he was on Capitol Records, and he was huge in Australia. And the single was called Speak to the Sky. And we were driving it up the charts, and radio was very reluctant to play it. It was a slow build. Wherever it went on the radio, it sold. This particular tip sheet did an editorial and basically called out Capitol Records and said, Capitol Records is hyping the whole record. It's a fake. They're going out and buying singles. They're lying to you. And Al saw that, was enraged, had a conference call with us immediately and said, I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. So when you all walk into radio next week, you'll know it. Number one, effective immediately, I'm canceling all our advertising in the Bob Hamilton radio tip sheet. And you're going to hear about it because they're going to talk about it. Number two, I'm not going to make payments on any car that's trying to run me over. And that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to dictate to us what our hits should be because they have a little clique of program directors. So when you meet with your program directors next week, I want you to specifically start your conversations and say, this is what Capitol Record is doing. We're doing it for this reason, and we want you to be aware of it so you can follow the tip sheet and see if there's a reaction, because we're not going to advertise. And radio said, well, why are you telling us this? Well, we want to tell you so you can see the integrity of the tip sheet. 1 year later, that tip sheet was out of business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah.
Other tip sheets caught wind of that and said, we better rectify whatever we're doing real quick. Because if Capitol can do that, Columbia can do it, and Warner's can do it. So he was an incredible, dynamic leader. And he could come into a room and the worst thing in your life could have happened. And within 15 to 20 minutes, he could have you turned around. An amazing individual.
So we have 5 minutes left in our segment here. What happened? Why did he leave? Why did
Capitol?
he leave Capitol? And
well,
what did he do after that?
Okay, very simply, the time came for Capitol. Bhaskar originally was the president, and he got elevated to the chairman, and Bhaskar appointed a president. Al naturally thought the job was going to be his. The job went to Don Zimmerman. Once that happened, Al wasn't happy. It wasn't that he disliked Don, and it wasn't that he didn't get along with him. Al thought he merited the job.
That he got passed over.
Right. He felt he got passed over. So within very short order, his phone rang, and a guy named Robert Stigwood called him. He met with Robert Stigwood, and Robert Stigwood offered him to be the president of RSO Records.
Right.
And we know what he did there. What history was made there, and he stayed there for years until he left, started his own little label, Network Records, and then that was absorbed by Geffen, and he went to work at Geffen, where he broke a myriad of acts, including Guns N' Roses.
Network was originally distributed by Elektra Asylum, and I was there, and his first signing that I recall was Del Shannon.
I don't remember that, but I do remember that he had Irene. He managed Irene Cara at that point too.
Irene Cara also, but Del Shannon had an album in production with Tom Petty called "Drop Down and Get Me," and that was released by Al's Network label.
Yeah,
I didn't get to meet him during that period, but we were working on the same different ends of the same project, basically. I did an extensive interview with Del that's on my YouTube channel. For anyone that's
I'm gonna have to look at that.
Might want to take a listen. It's pretty good. He was in really good shape and in good spirits, and had a good thing going. Anyway, so Al Coury's legacy is what? How did he affect and change the way promotion is done for future executive regimes?
Well, I would hope that his influence was broad enough that other promotion executives at other labels took the lead in following what Al stood up to a lot of stuff inside the tower too. When he said only I can hire and fire promotion people, that was a huge upheaval in the building, because sales had always controlled promotion. And Al said, you can't do that. You can't do that, because necessarily I've got to unify everything, and what sales priorities are and what a promotion man's priorities are two different things, because we're the vanguard. The promotion guys got to hit the beach, and then the artillery's got to come, distribution and sales. So not every label had the kind of leadership that Al had. Al was a hands-on, day-to-day, 24/7 guy. You could never not reach him if you needed him, and he could never ever fail to back you up when you needed something. I know from other people that I've talked to at other labels that it was not like that. And that's why a lot of guys heard about Capitol. And by the way, when we needed people, we had no trouble getting some of the best people in the industry
Right.
because of Al.
Everybody
So
wanted to work there. Everybody wanted to have a working relationship with this guy who's one
yeah,
of the
and
industry
he was
leaders and a kind of a visionary in a way.
well, he was just a great, like I said, when we started, he was a great music man. He loved, ate, drank, slept music, and he could get you excited about almost anything that he talked about. And he was just an incredible leader.
Well, great, Steve. Thanks for sharing your memories of Al Coury. It's great. I'm glad that we were able to get this done as part of our series.
You're welcome, Steve.
Have a great one. Talk to you soon.
You too, buddy.